Where's my money? You really trying my patience, boy. You think you can steal from me and walk away scot-free? You've got two options, pay back or die right here. Relax, Mr. Jones, I'll pay you back. I just need a little time. Time? Time is money, and patience is a luxury I can't afford. If you kill me now, he said with mock seriousness, you'll never see your money again. But let me go, and I'll bring you double. Mr. Jones pressed the barrel of the gun harder against Charles's head, eyes narrowing. Do you think I was born yesterday? I think I'll pass. How about I just blow your head off right now? Before the trigger could be pulled, a loud, urgent knock echoed through the room. Mr. Jones glanced toward the door, his fury redirected. Who's there? He barked, signaling one of his men to answer it. The door swung open, revealing Robin. Well, isn't this Charles, the greatest con man in all of New Amsterdam? Seems like you've gotten yourself into quite the predicament. Charles glared at Robin, his amusement quickly replaced by irritation. What do you want, Robin? Mr. Jones snapped. If this is about one of your fruitless voyages, I don't have the time or the patience. On the contrary, I bring news, valuable news, but this is a delicate matter. I'd suggest you excuse Charles and your men before we talk. He gestured for his men to take Charles to the dungeon. I have made the greatest discovery of all. I found it, the Island of Gold, a paradise hidden from sight, long sought by sailors for centuries. No one's ever succeeded, until now. Mr. Jones raised an eyebrow, his skepticism apparent. The Island of Gold? He repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. You expect me to believe that nonsense? Robin reached into his bag and pulled out a gleaming bar of gold, its polished surface glinting in the dim light. This is just what I could carry back. The island has more gold than you can imagine, enough to make every man in New Amsterdam rich beyond their dreams. Mr. Jones' eyes widened, his skepticism dissolving into awe. Where is it? He demanded, his voice low with restrained excitement. It's called Elysia, Robin continued, his tone grand. But it's not just gold. The island is home to a genius inventor, a mind like the gods. His name is Muna. He and his companions, Chinedu and Amaka, are more than friends. They're lovers and protectors of the island. Muna built my ship in a single week and healed my broken ribs with magic and herbs. But the island isn't undefended. If we want the gold, we'll need an army. Mr. Jones paced the room, deep in thought. An army, you say? They're just 3 people. How difficult could it be? Robin chuckled darkly. If it were that simple, would I have come to you? Muna wields a blue crystal around her neck, a source of unimaginable energy. As long as he has it, he's unstoppable. But if we can separate him from the crystal, we might stand a chance. You think Charles can help us with this? Robin smirked. Who better to con a genius than the greatest con man in all of Amsterdam? With his skills, we can lure them into a false sense of security, take the crystal, and then invade. Then it's settled. Gather the men. We're going to Elysia. Meanwhile, in Elysia, Chinedu and Amaka trained day and night. Their laughter mingled with the crash of waves as they honed their skills with swords, spears, and bows. Amaka has become a formidable Amazon warrior, her arrows finding their mark with unerring precision. Chinedu, steadfast and disciplined, mastered the axe and sword. One morning, Chinedu sat by the forge, shaping a small dagger. Its blade shimmered like glass, sharp and unbreakable. What are you crafting today, O Master Creator? She asked. Amaka leaned casually against a nearby tree, her lips curving into a knowing smile. This is for you, Muna. I know you don't need a weapon to defend yourself, but I insist. It's my gift to you. The dagger, so delicate yet deadly, was the first gift she had ever received from Chinedu. Thank you, Chinedu. The trio shared a moment of joy, their laughter echoing across the shore. Despite the looming threat of invaders, they refused to let fear steal their happiness. Their bond was their strength, and together they prepared for whatever fate had in store. Bring me Charles, Mr. Jones commanded. Moments later, Charles was dragged in from the cell where he had been kept for months. His eyes burned with anger as he faced the man who had stolen his freedom. What do you want now, Jones? He spat. Mr. Jones smiled, his tone deceptively calm. An opportunity, Charles, a chance to clear your debt and make enough money to care for your sister. You wouldn't have to steal again. Charles's fists clenched. You held me here, away from her, when you know she is sick and needed. Now you want me to believe you're doing this out of kindness? I've been generous enough to give her some money while you've been here. Let's call it An investment. I'm offering you a job. We're heading to an island far to the south. All you have to do is retrieve a crystal that hangs around the neck of a man. Charles frowned. What's this crystal for? What's your real plan? You're not in a position to ask questions, Charles. You're the best con man I've ever known. Use your skills, and don't worry. We're not asking you to kill him. He's valuable to us. Just make sure you get the crystal. We'll take care of the rest. Robin, who had been silent until now, added, He's no enemy, Charles. We just need to ensure his cooperation. Go say goodbye to your sister. Clean yourself up. Tomorrow we sail. And remember, I have eyes everywhere. That evening, Charles returned home, his heart heavy with guilt and worry. His sister Alora ran to him, tears streaming down her face. Brother, they've hurt you, she cried, taking his hands. Charles forced a smile, wiping her tears. Don't cry, Alora. I'm here now, and will always be here for you. I've taken a job with Jones to pay off my debt and get enough money to take you to a better hospital. Everything will be fine. Alora's face darkened with concern. But is it safe? When will you return? Soon, he said, hugging her tightly. Soon. At dawn, the ship set sail. For 7 days and nights, they traversed treacherous waters, the endless horizon stretching before them. On the 8th morning, Robin spotted land, the lush, untouched island of Elysia. The crew paused just offshore, keeping their distance. This is where your journey begins, Jones said to Charles, handing him a small pack. You have 3 days to retrieve the crystal. 3 days? Charles protested. I need at least 7 to earn their trust. Jones hesitated, but eventually nodded. Fine, 7 days, but no more. My patience has limits. Charles ventured into the island alone, the dense jungle closing in around him. He saw a line of decomposing fish hung on threads and arrows pierced through it, and he decided it was the best place to camp. He began roasting fish over a small fire. I'm heading out for my morning training, she announced. Once a timid girl, Amaka had transformed into a formidable warrior. The fear of losing the 2 people she cared for had shaped her into someone different, sharp-eyed, steady-handed, and fearless with her arrows and spear. As she approached the shore, her sharp gaze caught sight of Charles, crouched near her training spot, tending to a small fire where fish roasted on sticks. Her instincts kicked in. Quietly, she drew an arrow, her muscles taut with readiness. Charles was completely unaware of her presence, focused on his fire. Amaka lined up the shot, but her hand hesitated. She had never taken a life before, and shooting someone in the back felt wrong. Resolute, Amaka lowered her bow and took a different approach. She moved swiftly, her silent footsteps gliding over the sand. In one fluid motion, she pinned the man down, her weight pressing firmly against his back, a small dagger held at his throat. Who are you, and what are you doing here? Charles, startled and trembling, froze beneath her grip. His breathing came in short gasps, his mind racing. Amaka was nothing like the welcoming people he had heard from Robin. I can't, he stammered, the blade grazing his skin, a thin line of red beginning to form. Seeing the terror in his eyes, Amaka's expression softened slightly. Empathy flickered across her face, and she released her hold, stepping back and letting him regain his footing. As Charles staggered upright, clutching his neck where her blade had nicked him, Amaka stood tall, her voice firm. Why are you here? And don't make me ask again. Charles, still shaken but sensing a chance to explain, spoke quickly. Our ship got caught in a storm and wrecked on the far side of the island. I couldn't find any survivors, so I decided to wander around to find a safe place to camp before night falls. When I saw these fish, I thought maybe someone else was here, so I stopped to camp. Amaka burst into a sharp laugh. You're lucky to be alive, but aren't you stupid? Didn't you notice the arrows stuck in those fishes? That should have told you a hunter was nearby. I figured it was worth the risk, Charles replied, a nervous but disarming smile forming on his lips. Amaka's sharp gaze softened again as she saw blood trickling from his neck. Without a word, she plucked the bark of a nearby tree, chewing it quickly. Let me see, she instructed, applying the herbal paste to his wound. Charles flinched at first, but her touch was surprisingly gentle. They sat in silence for a moment before Amaka broke it. What's your name? Charles, he answered. Well, Charles, are you sure you're the only one who survived the wreck? If there are others like you wandering this island, it's best you tell me now. Charles nodded earnestly. I swear, I'm the only one. Amaka studied his face for any signs of deceit, but found none. Finally, she sighed. "All right, I'll see if I can convince my friends to let you stay. Don't move from here." Back at the treehouse, Amaka called Muna and Chinedu for a brief meeting. "We have another intruder," she began, recounting the encounter with Charles. "He needs help. I may have cut him slightly on the neck, but he seems harmless. I think we should let him stay, at least until he can figure out what to do next." Chinedu immediately shook his head. "No, Amaka, we can't. You've forgotten what happened the last time Muna tried to help someone. We can't risk it again. So we just let him die? You know how dangerous this island gets at night. Please, Chinedu, reconsider." Muna, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Chinedu, Amaka is right. We can't let fear make us cruel. If he's dangerous, I'll know." Reluctantly, Chinedu sighed. "Fine." Amaka brought Charles into the treehouse and Muna tended to his wound. Something about Charles left Muna uneasy. Normally, Muna could sense the nature of a person, whether they carried goodness or malice. But with Charles, there was nothing, a blank slate. Despite this, Charles began to settle into life among them. His presence was disarming. He wasn't sneaky or secretive. Instead, he was cheerful, always wearing a welcoming smile. He seemed eager to contribute, and his culinary skills quickly set him apart. Charles introduced them to foods they had never tasted before: soft cakes, fluffy omelets, sweet smoothies, and freshly baked bread. These meals, prepared with care and precision, were unlike anything Amaka, Muna, or Chinedu had ever experienced. Amaka, who had always carried the burden of cooking for the group, found herself captivated. With Chinedu and Muna indifferent to kitchen duties, Charles's arrival felt like a gift. For once, she didn't have to worry about feeding everyone. She could rest, knowing Charles would handle it effortlessly. Charles, however, seemed just as captivated by Amaka as she was by his cooking. Every time she passed him, his eyes followed her, mesmerized by her strength and beauty. Their gazes often met, and in those moments it was as if they were speaking a silent language only they understood. But Muna noticed. The glances, the unspoken exchanges, that unsettled her. The next morning, as Amaka and Chinedu prepared for their morning training, Muna called them for a quick meeting. As Charles prepares breakfast up the treehouse, "I've noticed something. Charles keeps glancing at you, and it seems like you're always holding eye contact with him. Is there something going on?" Amaka's cheeks flushed slightly, but she shook her head, smiling. "It's not true. I'm not keeping eye contact with him," she denied. "It is true. I've seen it too. Do you love him, Amaka?" Chinedu asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. "No, I don't," she replied firmly, her tone turning cold. She stood abruptly, brushing past them. "If you'll excuse me, I have training to do." Muna and Chinedu exchanged stunned glances as Amaka disappeared into the trees. She had never dismissed them so curtly before, and it left them with no doubt. Amaka was in love with Charles. Muna smiled and made her way to the kitchen nook, where Charles was plating up a stack of pancakes. He served her with a flourish, adding a glass of orange juice on the side. "Perfect timing," he said, flashing a disarming smile. As Muna ate, Charles spoke about his life in New Amsterdam, painting vivid pictures of its bustling streets and vibrant culture. He marveled at Muna's inventions and remarked how they would thrive in a place like his. His words were open, his demeanor candid, and Muna found herself intrigued as she studied him closely. Later that evening, he prepared fish cakes and cornbread, served with a sweet and tangy strawberry sauce. The group gathered around the fire, their laughter echoing into the night. But as Muna and Chinedu climbed up into the treehouse to sleep, Amaka and Charles stayed behind, the firelight casting flickering shadows around them. They sat in comfortable silence, staring at the stars. Charles broke the stillness, his voice soft yet deliberate. "You're a strong and beautiful woman, Amaka." His words sent a shiver through her. For the first time, she felt something deep within her. With Charles, she didn't feel the need to fight for attention or prove her worth. He made her feel seen, valued in a way she hadn't known she needed. As he leaned in, their faces inches apart, Amaka hesitated. She glanced up and saw Muna standing on the balcony, her sleepy eyes watching them. Muna yawned and disappeared inside, leaving Amaka and Charles alone once more. It was the 6th day, and Charles had a mission to fulfill. Quietly, under the cover of night, he slipped into Muna's room. His steps were light, his hands steady. Years of experience as a con man had taught him to steal without a trace. He deftly cut the crystal from around Muna's neck. At dawn, chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the stillness, jolting everyone awake. Before they could react, the treehouse was surrounded. Armed men burst in, overpowering them with precision. Muna stood defiant, her neck bare where the crystal had once hung. Chinedu struggled against the grip of two burly men with guns, but it was futile. Amaka, her hands tied behind her back, stared in disbelief as she saw Charles with two other men, their expressions cold and calculating. The realization hit like a blow to the gut. Charles had played them all. Amaka's heart clenched as she met his gaze, searching for an answer, but his eyes revealed nothing. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice raw with anguish. "How could you betray me, Charles?" But Charles could not meet her gaze. He stood a few feet away, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. Her rage poured forth, unchecked, until Mr. Jones himself barked an order. "Shut her up!" In moments, she, Chinedu, and Muna were all tied securely to a tree near the mouth of the cave. By dawn, they had loaded enough gold their ship could carry. "Release Muna, and kill the other two. I've no use for them. I'll be back for the rest of my gold. I don't want resistance. This island is mine now," Mr. Jones declared. Robin stepped forward, his voice sharp with defiance. "That wasn't the agreement, Jones. We don't need blood on our hands." Jones waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Let the wild animals finish them off, so their blood won't be on our hands," he said, smiling. They dragged Muna, bound and struggling, back to the ship and locked her in a cage near the hull. As the ship pulled away from the shore, Charles stood at the railing, his face unreadable. With no one on sight, in a swift motion, he grabbed a barrel of gunpowder and a satchel of weapons, jumped overboard, and swam back to the island. Charles ran as fast as his legs could to the treehouse, grabbed a knife, some food, and headed up the mountain. As he neared the spot where Amaka and Chinedu were tied, he froze. His breath hitched as he spotted a sleek, black panther prowling toward them. Amaka and Chinedu's faces were masks of terror. They struggled against their bonds, panic surging through them. They had always prepared for a day like this, where they could defend themselves, but this was a nightmare they had never imagined. The panther leapt, its claws in Seth. But before it could reach them, a gunshot rang out. The panther's body crumpled midair, landing lifeless at their feet. Amaka looked up, stunned, and saw Charles standing a few paces away, his pistol still smoking. Without a word, he hurried over and cut their bonds. But Amaka's reaction was far from grateful. In one swift motion, she grabbed Charles's dagger from his belt and pressed it against his throat. Her hands were steady, her eyes burning with fury. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you come back here after what you've done? I should kill you where you stand." "Amaka, please," Charles pleaded, his voice cracking. "Let me explain. I never meant to hurt you, I swear." "Explain? You lied about everything. The shipwreck, being stranded. You played me from the start. You made me believe you needed help. You made me trust you." Chinedu stepped forward cautiously. "Amaka, let him speak," he urged, his voice calm despite the tension. Tears streaked Amaka's face as she glared at Charles. "You betrayed me," her voice trembling with emotion. "You let them take Muna. You should have let the panther kill me, because as long as I live, I swear I'll go through hell and back to fight anyone who tries to hurt her. So start talking, Charles. Now." Charles took a deep breath, his eyes locked on hers. "I never lied about how I feel about you, Amaka. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I never knew there was gold here. I never came here for the gold. I just wanted to pay off my debt to Mr. Jones and save my sister. Everything changed when I met you, Amaka." Amaka, seated across from him, smirked coldly. Her arms were folded tightly, her eyes sharp and unforgiving. "I knew, either way, Mr. Jones and his men wouldn't leave this island without getting what they want. I had to be part of their plan, so I know how to protect you and your friends. And your role was to get Muna's crystal, wasn't it?" She raised an eyebrow, "which I must say you did a very good job." "It's not what you think, Amaka." He reached into his satchel and pulled out Muna's crystal, holding it out for her to see. "This is the real crystal. What I gave them was fake. Mr. Jones has a lot of men and guns by my calculations. I don't see the possibility of you beating them with spears and arrows. Please, spare me the math. It wasn't your call to make. You took away our chance to fight, and now Muna is gone. You might not understand now why I had to work with them, but I want you to know that I love you so much, and I don't mind if it's going to take a lifetime to prove that to you. You're good with words, Charles, but all I care about right now is how we're going to save Muna. Relax, Charles said, forcing a smile. Everything they did worked according to my plan. Muna is safe, I promise. They won't hurt her, not yet. They need her, but you need to eat and regain your strength. Then we'll figure out a way to save her. He handed her a sandwich, which she snatched without a word. As Amaka ate, her anger didn't fade. She cast sharp, resentful looks at Charles, who responded only with a patient smile. Beside them, Chinedu sat silently, observing the scene. Something about the way Charles watched Amaka struck him deeply, and a bitter truth dawned on him. Realizing that Amaka had shown him so much love, but had done nothing to deserve her love. The trio returned to the treehouse as Charles began to teach them how to use a gun. Chinedu couldn't help but notice how Charles's subtle attempts to brush against her arm, to hold her gaze just a little longer than necessary. But instead of jealousy, Chinedu felt a surprising sense of joy. Amaka had found someone who truly cared for her, someone who would give her the love she doesn't have to beg for. By morning, they were ready to rescue Muna. The group made their way to the shore, but to their shock, their ship had been burned to the ground. Charles's face fell. His carefully crafted plans wasn't perfect after all. Fear flickered in his eyes as he braced for Amaka's fury. "So, mister, I've got this all planned out. Was this part of your plan too?" For the first time, Charles's composure cracked. Tears welled in his eyes as he began to fall, his efforts to hide them futile. Amaka stared in shock, then burst into laughter. "So you're a crybaby after all?" Charles looked away, embarrassed, while Chinedu chuckled softly as he watched their little drama. "Who needs something simple when we can have grand?" She pushed through a thicket of vines near the shore, revealing a hidden cave. Inside was a magnificent ship. "Here you go. She's called Sky, Muna's design." With Muna's manuals and Charles's map in hand, the three of them prepared to sail. Muna's tears fell endlessly, her heart weighed down by the haunting thought of Amaka and Chinedu being starved to death, or worse, devoured by wild animals. Robin watched her from a distance, unable to bear the sight of her locked in a cage like an animal. Summoning his courage, he approached Mr. Jones, pleading, "Let her out. This isn't right." After some deliberation, Mr. Jones released Muna from the cage, but her every move was closely guarded. The next morning, Robin and Mr. Jones found her standing at the ship's helm, staring out at the vast expanse of the sea. "Hope you're not planning to jump. That water's 2.6 degrees Celsius. It bites like knives and cuts deeper than regret. You'd be better off alive than dead. My men tell me you're refusing food. Eventually, you'll have to eat. Unless, of course, you're trying to starve yourself to death." Muna spat in his face. "You're either insane or completely devoid of reason if you think I'd help you after killing my friends and taking me hostage. I'd rather die than be part of your insanity." Mr. Jones's face darkened with fury. "Then you're of no use to me." His hand shot out, gripping Muna by the arm as he dragged her toward the edge of the ship. "No," Robin's voice rang out as he threw himself between them. "I won't let you hurt him. This isn't what we agreed on. No one was supposed to die." Mr. Jones's fury turned cold. Without a word, he pulled out his pistol and fired. Robin staggered, his hands flying to his chest as the life drained from his eyes. He fell backward, toppling over the railing into the frigid water below. Muna screamed, her voice raw with grief. She sank to her knees, unable to process the scene before her. "His last wish was for me to keep you safe, so I'll give you one more chance. Help me, to help you change your life for the better. Refuse, and I'll make sure your suffering matches your stubbornness." When Muna didn't answer, Mr. Jones ordered his men to take her back in the cage. 3 days later, the ship docked in New Amsterdam. Muna was dragged ashore and thrown into a dark, damp dungeon. At the port, Alora waited every day for her brother's return. She ran to meet the arriving ships, her heart pounding with hope. "Welcome, sir," she greeted Mr. Jones with a bright smile. "Where's my brother? Is he aboard?" Mr. Jones froze, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He barked orders to his men to search the ships, but Charles was nowhere to be found. Though the crew swore he had boarded the ship, no one had seen him since. Realization dawned on him. "He must have gone back to the island," he muttered under his breath. "Where's my brother?" she cried. "What have you done to him?" Mr. Jones sneered, shoving her aside. "You insolent brat! Your brother owes me, and now you're my payment. Take her to the dungeon." Alora screamed as she was dragged away. She would serve as leverage if Charles ever dared to show his face again. Deep within the cold, damp dungeon, Muna felt a profound emptiness. Her crystal had been her source of life and strength. Now, with it taken from her, it felt as though her very essence had been severed. The clanging of the iron gate jolted her back to the present. The guards flung Alora into the cell, the impact sending her sprawling to the ground. Muna's heart wrenched at the sight of her, sobbing and frail. Swallowing her own sorrow, Muna approached her. "Please, stop crying," she said, crouching beside her. "Why were you brought here?" Alora, wiping her tears, looked up. "Since our parents died, it's just been me and my older brother. He took care of me since when I was a baby. We've been living on the streets, and he steals to feed us. I know it's wrong, but he's not a bad person. He's kind and would never hurt anyone. I kept begging him to stop because he always got into trouble. He promised this would be the last time. He just wanted to pay off his debts and get me a better treatment." "What's your treatment for?" she asked, puzzled. "It's for cancer. It's like when your blood gets sick and it makes your hair fall out." She removed her scarf, revealing a smooth, bald head. "Oh, poor child, but where's your brother now?" "He followed Mr. Jones to some island and didn't return. I confronted him, so he ordered his men to throw me here." She broke into fresh sobs, her frail shoulders trembling. Muna's eyes widened. "What is your brother's name?" "Charles," Alora whispered. Muna's breath caught. A spark of hope and determination lit in her chest. She stood abruptly, piecing together the puzzle. "Charles. I remember seeing him board the first day, but hadn't seen him throughout the journey. Could it be that Charles had gone back to the island to help Amaka and Chinedu? Could that be why Mr. Jones had imprisoned his sister?" It all started to make sense. She knelt again and took Alora's hands in hers. "Alora, your brother is safe. I'm sure of it. He's with my friends, and they're coming for us." "Do you really think so?" "I know so. And let me tell you a secret." Alora's eyes widened. "What is it?" "I have magical powers." "Magical powers?" Alora gasped, her earlier fear momentarily forgotten. "Do you have a wand?" Muna chuckled softly. "No, something better. I have a magical crystal. Once my friends return it to me, I can heal you." Alora's face lit up with joy, and she threw her arms around Muna in a fierce hug. "Can I call you my fairy godmother?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Muna froze for a moment, caught off guard. No one had ever referred to her as a woman without her telling. "Yes, you can, Your Majesty." Sky arrived at the bustling shipport of New Amsterdam. They rescued Muna and Alora from the dungeon. Together, they journeyed back to the island of Elysia. There, under Muna's care, Alora recovered fully, and peace returned to their lives. What you hate about yourself might just be what makes you special. Look out for the silver lining.